Hi, I'm Shoestring Jane. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things thrifty, frugal and sustainable. And today I'm going to talk about why it can feel so hard sometimes to be frugal and why constantly being vigilant and trying to save your pennies, it can feel like the world is against you and conspiring to stop you actually achieving this. And here is why, and maybe suggestions about what you could do about it and what I've done about it in the past. I've mentioned this in a blog post recently about how I used to be embarrassed about being frugal. When I first started, I felt like I was somehow not successful and somehow failing in some way because I was having to watch my pennies. And I think that is a prevailing attitude. Our society tells you that to be successful, you've got to have lots of money coming in and doesn't always appreciate the points of success that aren't around money, like whether you are a really great parent, whether you're a really great friend, whether you're a fantastic creative person and don't earn money for it. I'm not talking about being a professional artist. Perhaps you're just super creative and you're just really good at your job in some way, just really talented in some way. Perhaps you are a philanthropist, perhaps you go and volunteer, perhaps you go to war-torn places and work for organisations that help people who are struggling with the effects of war. Perhaps you're a real hero in that way. And, that's a success. That's a big success. But it's also successful when you take charge of your finances and don't get into debt and make sure that you've got enough to get through to the end of the month. And maybe you can heroically save for something that really means a lot to you. So it could be a deposit on your first home, or maybe you really, really want to go traveling, or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what that goal is, but you've got a goal, you're working towards it, and you're achieving it ultimately. That's success, isn't it? So it's kind of getting over what society is telling us all the time is what you should be aiming for. You've got to be rich and famous. Being famous, actually, I think that probably sucks. I just think you've got the whole world looking at you and judging you for everything you do. So maybe focus on the smaller things that are going to make the biggest difference to your life. So that can help you keep you on track. If you think I am being frugal for a particular reason, or perhaps I am just being frugal to get by and not get into debt, and that I am sure is increasingly applying to some of us because the cost of living crisis hasn't gone away. The world is a really weird and scary place, and people in power are making decisions that impact on all of us negatively often. So don't be fooled by the frugality is a stigma thing and think of it as something that you are achieving and you can make a hobby of it. That's what I did as well. And kind of moving on from that is, have you ever been on a diet or tried to quit smoking or tried to stop drinking and you get well-meaning friends saying, let me get you a pint, go on, just let me get you a pint, I'll get you a pint, go on, have a fag, you can have a fag, go on, just a cake, just a little biscuit, have a biscuit, it's only one biscuit. You get this kind of thing, and those people may not realise how hard you are trying not to drink, not to smoke, not to eat rubbish because you want to lose some weight. That's me at the moment, I'm trying to lose a bit of weight. They're coming along and not really giving that thought, but you've given it a lot of thought. So you've got to stand your ground. And it's the same when you're trying to save money. So you'll get friends saying, how about we just go out? Come on, you've been out for ages with us. Let's go out. Let's go to this place. Let's go to that place. You'll get your children saying, I want this and I want that. Or your own internal dialogue saying, I really want a new dress. I really want to look as nice as this person with her new clothes, that kind of thing going on. And you have to shut them down. You have to shut them down and keep refocusing. I'm not buying those things. I have made a decision. I am not buying anything extraneous, or I'm on a no spend month, or whatever it is, shut them down and say to them very clearly, I'm sorry, I'm saving money this month. I'm saving money at the moment. I want to pay off my debts. Nobody can argue with that, can they? Or I would like to save for a holiday. Same with the children. I'm sorry, kids, we can't do that, but we can do this instead and find some free activities for them to do. Take a picnic with you so they're not bugging you for burgers and sandwiches and takeaways and that sort of thing. Just always be prepared. But say to them very clearly, sorry, kids, that's not in the budget this week. we can't afford that this week, so we're not going to do that, but we'll do this instead. So turn it, flip it, make it positive. And same with your friends. I can't afford to come out this month, but how about you bring a bottle and I'll provide some snacks and we'll sit and watch a film together, or just have a chat, or have a girly gathering or a manly gathering, or whatever you do, just or couples, let's have a potluck. Let's have a potluck supper. We'll all bring part of the evening's dinner and we'll do that. So think about doing things differently. Have a games night. That's one that my girls like doing. It costs them nothing. They have absolutely hilarious games nights. So something like that. You can just do things differently. It's just flicking the switch and saying, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not listening to all these voices trying to coerce me and pressure me into doing what I don't want. And the other thing is not people, but society. We are bombarded with marketing. I was watching a TV programme yesterday and there was one advert after another. And it's so easy to kind of get drawn into them at the moment in the UK because it's spring and we're heading into summer. It's holiday marketing. All these families having the most marvellous time on the beach. You think, well, that would be nice, but if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to resist all of the marketing messages we are getting 24/7. And that applies to social media, that applies to TV, that applies to radio, it applies to everything. It's just everywhere, and it's hard to resist it. So think about your weak points. Do you find that you go onto TikTok and you are buying stuff endlessly from the TikTok shop? How about just mute TikTok for a bit? Give yourself a break. It doesn't do any of us any harm to give yourself a break from social media. Do you find that you are on Facebook, and increasingly Facebook is just full of people trying to sell you stuff? It is full of ads. It's really irritating. I just don't go on Facebook at all now, except for my group, and I'll go onto my group, which is my secondhand and frugal life. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother with Facebook at all at this point. Instagram, it's very easy to be kind of pulled into what influencers are doing. Snapchat as well, what they're doing, all the makeup hauls, all the beauty hauls, how beautiful their houses are, and that kind of thing. Find out your weak points and just forget it. And if you can stream TV with no adverts, brilliant. This is why I love the BBC here in the UK. Lots of people love to bash the BBC, and they will in the comments for me. I'm saying this again, but where else can you get really good TV with no endless adverts? You just can't. I like BBC Radio for that reason as well, and BBC Sounds. You can listen to podcasts and all sorts, and you don't have to listen to endless ads, and I find that quite refreshing. So anywhere you can find where you haven't got to have endless adverts, then that could be better. So it might mean you can pay a small subscription. I have to pay the BBC licence. We also pay for Netflix, and you don't get bombarded with ads. So also look at your email inbox when you've purchased something online in the past. There's no doubt people try and get you can have 10% off, you can have 15% off if you sign up to a newsletter. And then once they've got you, haven't they? Send you special offers, details of their sales. Just get rid of them all. Unsubscribe to all of those newsletters that are going to try and make you buy something. Another thing that makes it quite difficult to be frugal in this day and age is that it's no longer considered shameful to have debts. It's considered normal. And I am old enough, being a boomer, that it was still a bit shameful, and it was still difficult to get credit. Even when I was kind of 16 with my first wage packet, I remember going a little bit overdrawn and the bank manager telling me off, like they wouldn't even notice now. I was only about £5-10 overdrawn, but literally getting told off. And that's just funny. You just don't get that anymore. So it's so easy to get into debt. Everything you buy, it could be a takeaway, it could be the smallest item. You are offered the chance to buy it through things like Klarna. 3 easy instalments. Okay, you don't have to pay interest on those easy instalments, but if you don't pay them, you do. And if you start doing that for everything, then you've got lots and lots of instalments building up, and you may not be able to manage them anymore. And you've got into debt over a takeaway. For goodness sake, get a grip, people. If you can't afford a takeaway, then don't have a takeaway. That's what I say. Don't have a takeaway. It's not just Klarna. It's lots of other organisations like that. Even PayPal does it now. Everything I buy on PayPal, it offers me the chance to pay in instalments, and I don't want to. So it's so difficult, isn't it, to not get into debt? And it is quite normal. Lots of people have a lot of debt, and you only have to watch those TV programmes where they're getting financial advice and help to realise just how people will bury their heads in the sand because the debt seems so big that it's not possible to tackle it. So they'll just carry on, plough on, getting into debt, and stop and think. If you stop early enough and get some help, and there is lots of help out there. I will try to remember to link some organisations that can help you in my description box below. Don't stick your head in the sand, and don't allow yourself to be just allowed to think that debt is normal. Really consider, I know some debts you have to get into, so it may be that you have to have a car and you can't get a car unless you get a loan for the car. I would still say don't buy a new car because it's too expensive. Think about, second-hand car. Okay, if you need to get some credit for that, fair enough. If you need a car, we need a house, a mortgage is a form of debt, but only going to earn money on property. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's quite good debt, as long as you can afford to service it and you can afford to pay it off. But other than that, really think twice about debt, or treat credit cards cautiously. So it may be that you need to have a credit history, so you feel you have to buy things on your credit card, but really have a plan for that. Do one shop a month on your credit card and pay it off instantly that you get paid, so that you've got a credit history, you've got a chance to build up a credit history, but you don't get into debt. And how ridiculous I think that my credit score rather, has gone down since I've had literally no credit. So since I've had no debt at all, and I don't allow myself a credit card, I don't want a credit card. If I can't afford to buy something, I can't afford to buy it. So that's that. I have to save up for it. So I don't have a big income coming in. I am not at the stage of my life where I can look ahead and think, I can pay this off over 5 years. I can't. My income is sporadic. I don't want to do that. And as a consequence, my credit score has gone down, and that is stupid. Not that it matters because I'm not using it for anything, but if you're trying actively not to be in debt, but you still perhaps need to apply for credit for something at some point, and you have got no credit score, that just seems crazy to me, but that is the way it works. And when you work hard, maybe you've got a busy life, it's easy to think, I just need to treat myself. I deserve this. And you do. Christ, you do deserve something. You deserve some treats in your life. I'm not saying, it's a sackcloth and ashes sort of existence that you need to be living. It really depends on your budget. But I would say you've got to budget in some treats for yourself and your family. I think that's really important. It's important that you get rewarded. And you don't have to go mad, though. And if you plan those, you put a certain amount aside for treats, then that is fine. And if you choose to spend that budget on a takeaway once a week or once a month, then that's fine. As long as it's in your budget, that's fine. And you do deserve some treats. It's horrible if you feel like you're just working 24/7 and it's drudgery and you've still got no money and you're having no fun. So build in some fun. And I'm really aware that this is the case for some people. My daughter, one of my daughters in particular, is really struggling because her rent is so high and she lives by herself, and it's quite difficult. The rent goes up, the bills go up, her wages don't go up. So it can make you feel very despondent. And I felt like this as well. So it's really easy to just go, oh, what the hell? I'm tired. I've been working really hard. I am going to buy X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. So if you plan in some treats, that's much less likely to happen, I think. Another thing that makes it hard for us to be frugal in today's society is that most of us have little or no financial education. And how can you manage your finances when you're in a situation where you literally have no financial literacy? No one's ever taught you. And unless you really have an interest in the subject, it's probably not one of those things you're going to think, oh, as a hobby, I'm going to go and do a free course on personal finance. You can get them online, worth doing. But, unless you really have a reason to do that, most of us are not even going to consider it, are they? We just kind of blunder along and hope for the best. So it's frustrating. So what I would say is give yourself a financial education, read some books. There are lots of books out there. Be wary of taking financial advice from people like me, not that I'm giving any, people on YouTube, anyone can make a YouTube video, but people who have got credibility, and there are free courses, as I mentioned. The one I looked at was on Udemy, and that's an online course provider, and some of the courses cost something and some of them cost nothing, and often they're very, very cheap or on offer. So, and they're useful, there's all sorts you can do. So educate yourself and educate your children. Don't let your children get to the point where they're renting their first home and they know nothing about renting. They've got no savings. They don't understand about interest rates. They don't understand about debt. Basics, teach them basics so that they are not walking blindly into the world with no clue about finance. And that, I have to say, is exactly what I did. So I do know that that is really, really difficult. And I learned a lot of hard lessons because I didn't know about finance and I had no financial literacy. So it's never too late to learn, is it? Never too late. Another reason, and I have touched on this already, that it's really hard to be frugal today is that housing is so flipping expensive. So buying a house is so unaffordable for many people. Buying any kind of home, even the most modest flat, is really unaffordable for a lot of people, depending on where you live in the country. Certainly in the southeast where I am, because we're close to London, I guess, and it's commutable, the housing prices are very expensive here. And it's really, really hard, particularly for young people. And as a consequence, obviously, rents are high as well, because there's a lot of people who need to rent because they can't afford to buy. The landlords have to purchase those properties in the first place and they want a return on their investment. So rent prices are high as well. It was really, really hard. It's hard. All I would say on this is don't feel like you have to have the best place straight away. If it means staying with your family for longer as a youngster, do it and save up, but don't just stay there and not save up. Save up, have a goal, downsize. If you live in a big property that you don't use very much of, think about downsizing. You do have to factor in costs of removals if you're selling, of course, but if you're renting, then just get something smaller, something more modest. Maybe it's not in the best area, but it's affordable to you. And it is really hard. And look at free housing options. I mean, there aren't many these days, but there are some. For example, my parents used to have a job just fleetingly. They didn't do this for more than a year or so because it didn't suit them at all, but it would suit some people, where they acted as driver, gardener, housekeeper for a very posh lady in Norfolk, and they got free accommodation for that job. So they worked and kind of got things going, and they got a little bit of money and they got free accommodation, and then they could do a bit more work if they wanted to within the estate to earn extra money. So there are ways of doing it. There are jobs where you get live-in accommodation, not so many again, so you tend not to earn very much doing it. So if you're a nanny, sometimes you get living accommodation, but you don't earn much. Sometimes if you're in service industries, they'll give you living accommodation. Again, you probably don't earn very much. So, but it's worth considering. There are organisations that allow you to look after properties. So there may be big buildings where they just want someone to keep an eye on it. So they'll let you, they're going to sell it eventually, and then perhaps for 6 months or a year, they'll allow people to live on a very low rent. And this can be the case in cities, I think. So there is an organisation, I'll try and find the organisation, I'll stick it in the description box below. I think it's still going. But the idea is that you are a kind of guardian of the property, a property guardian, and you get charged something, but you don't get charged very much. And it's not a long-term solution, but it might help short-term. Probably not with a family, probably for singletons, really. Anyway, it's hard. That is why it's really hard. I don't have any real answers for that. I think in the US, you see a lot of people going for van life or tiny homes and that kind of thing. In the UK, our planning is so stringent on where you can park a van, or where you can put a caravan, or where you can place a tiny home. Land is still horribly expensive to buy somewhere to put a tiny home, or to put a mobile home of some sort. It's not really a cheaper option. It's not very much cheaper at all. We have so many restrictions here. You can't just go around doing van life because you'll get moved on all the time. So unless you are lucky enough to have somewhere you can hide your van, or I know people do, they kind of have vans that look like removal vans and they just park on the street and that kind of thing. But it's hard, it's hard not having a base. So there are options, but there aren't many, and that makes it hard to be frugal. And I don't have the answers. And if you don't happen to live within walking distance of where you work, then you've got transport costs, and they have become quite expensive. Public transport in the UK is very good. It exists and it's pretty good, and we have trains and buses, but it's quite expensive. Running a car anywhere, buying and running a car, it's expensive. And although they're saying in the UK that the cost of petrol has dropped just lately, it's still a lot more than it was just a few years ago. So that's another way that it's hard to be frugal. So, I mean, what can you do? Because if you work in London or a city so that you can earn a bit more money, you probably can't afford to live in London. I mean, I've got two daughters who live on the outskirts of London. Honestly, their rent is astronomical, and they won't be doing it forever because it's unaffordable. They just want the experience of living in London for a few years. So, it's hard, isn't it? And so unless you can walk or cycle, or you can car share, and that is a possibility, isn't it? You can do some car sharing. It's hard. So that's another thing that makes being frugal quite difficult. I know when my children were little, I very much relied on grandparents for childcare, and that's because childcare was prohibitively expensive, and I think it's much more expensive now. And I couldn't really afford to go to work. It wouldn't have been worth it if I had to pay for childcare at that point. So I was very lucky in that I had the grandparents to help when they were little, and then when they went to school, somebody who worked where I worked, we did the night shift, we did the evening shift in a call centre. And it wasn't the best job, but it did kind of fit in with family life. So my friend, who would do opposite shifts so that she would look after the kids when I was on the early shift until the husband came home. And then I would do the same for her. And it worked brilliantly. But we were so lucky. I mean, how did that happen? I mean, I didn't know her when I first started that job. I met her once at a National Childbirth Trust thing, and then at work, and we realised we had the NCT in common and got chatting and became friends, and we lived close together and our kids went to the same school. So that worked brilliantly, but how you could plan that, I don't know. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go to work, and then we would have really struggled because that made all the difference, my part-time income at that point. So childcare is really expensive. We don't all have family that can step in and help with the childcare. So we have to bounce about. We have to do odd shifts. Maybe you and your partner are kind of ships passing in the night because one of you comes in from work to look after the kids, the other one goes out. Maybe you're lucky and you can do a job from home that kind of works around your kids. It tends to only really work when they're school age though, because if they're there in the background all the time, you have to entertain them and do stuff with them. You've got to sit and work. So it is difficult. It's really, really difficult. Again, I don't have one answer, but doing what I do now, which is a mix of things. I probably could have done this around the kids, but there was no YouTube then, and eBay was just starting really. So it wouldn't necessarily have been easy to do at that point, but it's probably easier now. You could perhaps consider some side hustles and working for yourself. Coffee's going cold. The other thing about frugality and what makes it hard is it takes time. Things take longer. So things like scratch cooking and repairing clothes and maybe working in your garden and growing some vegetables, or, just cooking from scratch, batch cooking, cycling to places rather than getting in the car, doing your own cleaning, taking time to hunt for bargains and shop around for the best deals on utilities and that kind of thing. It all takes time. And I know when I worked full time and I still had my family at home at that point, I was often just exhausted from doing that. So getting back and then cooking from scratch felt really hard. So I did a lot of batch cooking at that point. I used my slow cooker a lot. And occasionally, we had a jar of pasta sauce and some spaghetti because you're only human, aren't you? But I would try to do that rather than getting a takeaway because it was just unaffordable and I couldn't afford to do that. I've always enjoyed doing the garden. I wouldn't want somebody else to do my gardening. But, I didn't have time to do all of the things I do now. In fact, I don't even know how I did what I did because I did a lot. I was writing a blog. I was working full time. I was growing vegetables with Justin, obviously, did all my own cleaning, did most cooking from scratch. And it was just organisation really was the key. But it is hard, it's hard. I think the way I got through it was to make it feel like a hobby and a bit of fun. And it was fun in some respects. So bargain hunting, finding things secondhand that I know that I either couldn't afford or would have had to pay a lot for, that gives you a real sense of achievement. That gives you a real buzz. So I loved that. And I did enjoy cooking. I've always enjoyed cooking. And it does give you a buzz when you've gone down the garden and you've bought in a load of fresh vegetables and you've picked some berries and everything looks so lovely and fresh and it's cost you just your physical work really. So there's a lot of satisfaction to be gained, but it does take time. And if you had really small children, it's going to be even harder, working full time with little children. You want to be able to spend some time with your kids, not spend all of your time growing vegetables. So maybe that's just not feasible for you. So just do the things that you can do and save money when you can save money. I did things when my kids were little, like I always had a present box for all the little parties they used to get invited to. So if I saw a little bargain in the January sales, maybe I saw some colouring books, some colouring pens, pick them up, put them in the present box, and then I'd have a nice little gift for when they got invited to all these little things. So it saves me. And I also set myself a budget. I did not have to spend £10-15 on every child because I had 3 kids and they're always getting invited to things. So £5 limit, that was my limit then, and I'm sure you could still do it now. I'd buy second-hand things. If they look new, they'd go in the gift box, and that would be for everybody, not just for other people's children. So there's things you can do, and I would suggest, if you have got children, try and get hold or borrow a copy of the Tightwad Gazette. It's from the 90s, it is still a classic, it is still brilliant and full of fantastic ideas for families. It's very American based, it's still relevant, it's very 90s, most of it still will apply. So although it's really, really hard sometimes to be frugal when your life is so busy and crammed and you have so many demands on yourself, it is difficult. What's more difficult is kind of having a lot of debt and feeling out of control or living paycheck to paycheck, and one little crisis can plunge you into a really big crisis. So, perhaps you do your back in, you can't work and you only get sick pay for a couple of weeks. What if you can't work for 6 months and you've got no backup savings and you don't have any frugal skills? What happens? It doesn't take much, does it, really? These things sadly happen. An illness or a job loss or some form of crisis, or you have caring responsibilities for older relatives and you have to do less work. These things happen to everybody at some point. So being as prepared as you can, you can't be fully prepared, I do appreciate that. Being as prepared as you can, it really does help you in the long term. So I just think, try and read around the subject and think about what you can do to save money. And initially, I'm sure you're going to make a lot of savings once you start looking into things like meal planning and, cutting out food waste and buying secondhand and all of those things. And then maybe you could do things like I mentioned accommodation, but I didn't mention how when I worked full time, I also helped with the costs of my accommodation by having a lodger. So for a long period of time, I had a lodger and it was great. It was nice company. And also foreign language students, we took those in for a while. We didn't have to have them full time. So that worked when the girls were at university, but coming home at holidays meant that when their rooms were empty, we could still make money from them. So things like that. Just think out of the box. Try and think how you can bring extra money in whilst really cutting your expenses, and make it a hobby and try and make it fun. And good luck is all I can say. So times are tough for lots of us, aren't they? So the more you can make frugality something that's acceptable for you and something that is kind of acceptable for your family and friends, and that you don't feel embarrassed about and you're not ashamed about and you are kind of determined and single-minded about, the better. Anyway, that's today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe and hit your notifications bell so you know next time I've got a video out. See you next time. Bye for now.